Hello and welcome to Sparrow Thought, the podcast that shines a light on people, organisations, issues and ideas that often get overlooked or are misrepresented in the media. I'm your host, Tom Spare. Today, I'm trying something different. Usually I have a guest on the show. We'll have a conversation that lasts between 30 minutes to an hour, talking about a subject that has impacted them, a cause they're fighting for, an issue they want to profile. That takes a lot of time to source guests, interview, edit and promote. I want to make sure those interviews are high quality, so this year I'm aiming for less, not more. In between, I want to share essays like the one you're going to hear shortly. It'll just be me, in my own words, sharing ideas and thoughts with you. Today is Long COVID Awareness Day. 6 years after lockdown, millions are still living with long COVID. And most of us have moved on or act as if the pandemic is over. It isn't. So here goes. This is essay number 1, Long COVID Awareness Day. What makes a hero? Is it their near superhuman abilities, their strength, their endurance, their ability to rise above any challenge, to see through their mission at any cost? Heroes are often those whose names and acts are remembered in statues that preserve their legacy. Songs and poems are dedicated to them. Their lives are turned into epic films and TV series. We aspire to have the courage of great minds. We look to them for inspiration. On the 23rd of March, at 8:30 p.m. 6 years ago, across the UK, millions turned on their TVs, their computers and laptops, watched on their phones and tablets, and listened on the radio to an announcement by the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. This was Johnson's Churchillian moment. He ordered us all to stay at home, to save our NHS. If we did this, he said, we would beat the coronavirus, and we'll beat it together. So those of us that did not need to go into the office for work stayed at home. Non-essential shops closed. Children were not allowed to go to school. The roads were empty. The high streets went quiet. And we followed the rules. The heroes that emerged from that time were not the politicians or the leaders. They were not the wealthy and the privileged. They were not those with near superhuman strength. They were the nurses and the doctors, the delivery drivers and the first responders. They were what became known as the essential workers, the people on the front line fighting a war against an invisible killer. Every week we went out and we clapped for our NHS and key workers. Thousands of former NHS staff returned to work. Students volunteered to join the cause. These people, everyday public servants, became the heroes. We redefined them as such, and they had our gratitude and our support and our lives in their hands. They did their job in good faith. Meanwhile, the government became entangled with the rules. As time passed and the British people, for the most part, stuck to the rules, the Prime Minister's chief advisor went to Barnard Castle to check his eyesight. While many were not able to gather, Christmas parties took place in Downing Street. Whilst they partied, thousands were not able to say goodbye to their loved ones. Even the Queen sat alone observing the funeral of her late husband. The heroes of our pandemic, the healthcare workers, the scientists and researchers, the teachers and transport workers, the delivery drivers and the shopkeepers, have been forgotten, as have the people who are still living with long COVID. Meanwhile, our leaders, the heroes we turned to of old, have failed us. They've not offered us a brighter future. They've not offered us an alternative vision. They only offer us gloom and doom and the talk of war. 6 years ago, our society, our state, our politics were fracturing. Then a virus arrived. The cracks widened into a deep, yawning chasm. A chasm between the wealthy and the poor, between the privileged and the marginalised, between the healthy and the sick, between those with family and those who face lockdown alone, between those who could work from home and those serving on the front line as key workers. Today, A record number of people are too ill to work. The British government, despite opposition, are still planning welfare cuts that will devastate the most vulnerable, people who have already suffered under austerity, who have lived through uncertainty, and who now merely exist day by day in pain and isolation, abandoned by politicians, forgotten by society. 6 years on, we live parallel lives. The privileged sailed on, largely unscathed. The squeezed middle majority have stitched together old and new, trying to move on, whilst the most vulnerable have been abandoned. It's estimated that 2 million people in the UK live with long COVID, a dynamic disability that has left tens of thousands bedbound or at best housebound. Daily tasks, doing the washing up, changing bed sheets, are arduous. Transport links are inaccessible. Hundreds of thousands have given up work, lost their jobs, or have heavily reduced their working hours. COVID does not discriminate. It does not care about age or race or status. For many people, it does not care about prior health or fitness. As many as 1 in 10 infections can lead to long COVID. Yet the Office for National Statistics has stopped collecting data. Vaccine uptake is now very patchy. The NHS is overwhelmed, and our governments in Westminster, Cardiff, Edinburgh and Stormont look the other way. As Nicola, one of the people I spoke to for my podcast in 2025, put it angers me that no one is talking about COVID anymore. If they do, it's in the past tense. This is my present. Last year, I spoke to 5 young people about their experiences of being part of Generation COVID. Will was 2 months into turning 18, pondering the academic route or a more vocational path into construction. Izzy was heading from uni in York for a weekend with the girls in West Wales. Emma and Emily were preparing for their A-levels. And Eden was a couple of years behind, readying herself for her GCSEs. 5 young people who were hopeful about the future until rumours started to spread like the virus that was travelling thousands of miles away in China. Within weeks, they were all thrown into lockdown and their plans were suddenly in ruins. The pandemic stole a lot of things from us. It took away loved ones. It stole the futures of thousands. It left many isolated and abandoned. I think of my grandmother, for example, who, before the pandemic, had a busier social life than me, but was limited to her small house in the Midlands. I think of all the students I called in those early months of the pandemic to check in on them. I think of those close to me living with long COVID even now, and I mourn the end of my 20s when I was supposed to have the world at my feet. In 2025, I created 3 episodes on long COVID. I spoke to adults whose lives were upended. Lucinda, 18 years old, who really struggles to even climb the stairs and has done since 2020, who sleeps in her kitchen, who is housebound. Eden, 21, from Belfast, a black belt in Taekwondo, who had to drop out of university after 2 weeks because she got reinfected. Yanto, who was training for the Cardiff Triathlon when he fell ill, who lost his job. You can't do triathlons anymore. I spoke to breathing coaches Vicky and Jackie, who work with people living with long COVID, and ME and CFS, who have their own lived experience of the condition. Together we discussed how we can support those still living with this invisible illness. You can find those episodes in the show notes. They're called Living with Long COVID, Supporting Those Living with Long COVID, and Long COVID Kids. Today, on Long COVID Awareness Day, 6 years after lockdown began, I'm reading these reflections to remind us that this isn't over. The crisis continues, the suffering continues, and we must not look away. In those early days of the pandemic, I was alone and frightened, sitting in my 1-bed flat in Cathays. I did not know if I'd see my family again. I'd often think, filled with dread, of today, tomorrow, and all the days that would follow. I wondered what sort of world we would return to. I hoped for a more caring world. But all I see now is division and selfishness. I decided to do my bit to counter the hopelessness in my small ways. Make a podcast, this podcast, where I try to shine a light on the voices we don't normally hear from. In my work, I try to help colleagues and be positive. And when I'm with my friends, I seek connection and escape for them and for me. For today, tomorrow, and all the days that follow. I search for the light in the gloom. I seek connection, to be present, to be grateful for everything I have rather than mourn everything I've lost. I seek solemnity and meaning, and I search for fortitude that might guide me through these difficult times. At a local level, the changes are simple but powerful. We can check in on our friends and family who are living with long COVID. We can listen and acknowledge their illness. We can get their shopping, cook dinner, offer practical help. We can be understanding and accept their limitations. It's nice to invite them, but most times they can't go. Most importantly, we can believe when they tell us they're experiencing and what they're experiencing. We can trust what they say about their bodies. We can be patient and flexible, understanding their chronic illness is unique and that their needs can change week to week, day to day. We can wear masks when we're ill and keep away from vulnerable people when we're ill. We can advocate for clean air in indoor public spaces like schools through HEPA filters. Parliament has them, the World Economic Forum has them. So why don't our next generation of young people in schools and some of the sickest in our country have access to clean air? At national level, the demands are clear. We must reinstate the long COVID clinics that have been shut down. We must ensure that personal independence payment is maintained and that long COVID is recognised as a disability with proper access to benefits. We must compensate teachers and other key workers who caught COVID whilst following government guidelines and had their careers cut off at a stroke. We must stop hiding people with long COVID in the shadows, writing them off through NHS number manipulation or forcing them back to work, which has been proven to do far more harm than good. And we must properly fund research and aftercare. We poured billions into vaccines, furlough and business loans. We spend embarrassingly little on supporting those still suffering. We must do better. I hope that history will remember our heroes, the real heroes, the everyday people and public servants who put their lives on the line. And I hope that we will support and help all those still suffering for today, tomorrow, and all the days that follow. The pandemic is not over. Roughly 1 in 10 COVID infections cause long COVID, and that's without any associated organ damage or viral persistence in the body. We all need to do better to support those living with long COVID. After all, we're just one COVID infection away from developing long COVID symptoms. So make yourselves aware of long COVID. Make others aware of long COVID. Together we can make the world a safer place to live for today, tomorrow, and all the days that follow. You've been listening to Spare a Thought. Spare a Thought is a Be the Change Media Network production. This episode was written, edited, and narrated by me, your host, Tom Spare. The music is by Wondershare Filmora. Thanks for listening.